welcome to V Podcast. For the past many weeks now, the world has been encountering an uncertainty like never before. All over the planet, the human race has been forced to come face to face with a pandemic that has brought with it complete lockdown, life standing still, absence of social interactions, and curbs on movement and travel, restricting us to an indoor life. More than ever before, notions of mortality, transience, and the impermanence of life seem evident and have become a part of our everyday thoughts. The human race is worried today about how the future is going to be. There are a million questions with no specific answers. But all knowledge and understanding rests upon and grows on the foundation of wisdom we have gained as a rich legacy from thinkers, theorists, scholars, writers, critics, and philosophers. Let's pay heed to the words of Miss Prathibha P, Assistant Professor, Department of English, as she shares her views on living in these challenging times, along with the wise thoughts gained from literature and its creators.
To connect to the world out there through the digital medium, despite the physical limitations imposed by the current pandemic, is in fact overwhelming. Yes, what can be more reassuring than this possibility to be in touch, as the phrase goes, but through audio waves, which hopefully carries germs of inspiration rather than, thankfully, those of infection. The present circumstances call for some thoughts on survival. Survival is defined as a state of continuing to live or exist despite difficulty or danger. Reminded of Darwin's principle? How to survive amidst chaos. Or is it that what we consider as chaos is the natural system's survival mechanism? Like Alexander Pope chants, "It is but a part we see and not a whole." When we feel depressed owing to our failure in making sense of that part, the only option is to turn to imagination and weave our own reality. Arts and literature are often considered as leisure time engagements. Now that many are off work, reading and writing are suggested as alternatives to utilize time. One may still ask, how can I read when my mind is troubled? When uncertainty knocks at my door? Valid question. But before we arrive at a conclusion, you know what the African writer Chinua Achebe remarked? When suffering knocks at your door, and you say there is no seat for him, he tells not to worry because he has brought his own stool. Let's face it, and of course there is our own Shakespeare frowning at our fickleness. The man who has himself survived the plague, arising out of the deadly disease with some of his famous works, including tragedies. Obviously, being a stakeholder in playhouses and a theatre company, which were then closed, he would have been anxious. Yet, the spirit of the writer who writes without even hope of his work reaching an audience, that spirit is beyond comparison, and something to emulate. Isn't it Henry, the character from Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms, who voiced? The world breaks everyone, and afterward many are strong at the broken places. Here I am reminded of the Canadian writer Margaret Lawrence's female character Hagar Shipley, who embarked on a journey to find herself at the age of 90. You heard it right, at the age of 90. I know you're thinking that after all she's a fictional character. But these days, people have been successfully digging up those tales of apocalyptic fiction that predict a catastrophe similar to what we are facing now. Many people interpret this state of affairs as a pointer towards the impending so-called end of the world. The Indian writer Amitav Ghosh drives home an important point in this regard during one of his interviews. I quote, "The world is not the same for everyone. There are many worlds. Some have already ended and some are ending, while others are being reborn." How true. Haven't we heard of many extinct species? And don't we wonder at times how the world seems quite strange to us with the shifting values? Ghosh anyway proves his point by citing the example of many indigenous societies for whom the world they knew ceased to exist long back. Maybe some of us are part of such resilient communities. In spite of the hardships, these communities have survived and from their experiences have created new worlds. The pertinent question here is, what do we imbibe from them that would see us through this novel experience of the novel coronavirus? As Ghosh reiterates, it is, quote unquote, to slow down. Slow down the mad rush to make money compromising on the simple things in life. Slow down the fast pace of depleting nature, disregarding its worth. Cut down on unscientific, unsystematic, and underplanned activities that bring about more of disaster than development. A lot of queries pop up in our mind. Why this distressful situation? Why not a panacea? Because, as the American Nobel laureate Toni Morrison says, there is really nothing more to say except why. But since why is difficult to handle, one must take refuge in how. Focusing on how brings us to myriad goals to set. The very first one being to strengthen our morale. To divert our attention to productive ventures, to support fellow beings in all possible ways, to follow expert instructions and avoid pitfalls, to remain updated and prove useful to the society, and more importantly perhaps, to set a model for those curious young people hovering around us, absorbing each of our mood variations. They are the ones who have been brought up on the escapades of Harry Potter and the like. to thrust the fragile nature of reality upon them while they are yet to construct parallel worlds of creativity and passion would be too harsh on them. Outwardly, though they worship the superheroes portrayed in literature and popular media, inwardly, these heroes are replaced by certain adults with whom they interact, mostly parents. Feeling burdened and doubtful about doing justice to this exalted position? How about undergoing a reassuring activity now? Ready? Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Connect to your inner self. Now, think of that person you know of who can be best cited as a survivor. It can be your own younger self, sometimes your parents who have battled against odds to raise you up, a relation, a friend, your maid, a boss, a celebrity, a person you've read about, your favorite fictional character, or even your next door neighbor. It can be anyone and everyone. What makes that person distinct? Yes, it is the choice to survive. This is a page unveiled out of the book of life. Once again, take a deep breath and open your eyes to a world that has many things to offer to the survivor in you. Let me bid adieu, dear listeners, from this brief literary lessons of survival. Thank you.
What a wonderful sojourn in a world of words penned by some of the best writers. What a delight to have such insights shared, and above and beyond that, how hopeful it is to learn that we can and will build better days. Thank you, Prathibha ma'am, for your beautiful podcast.